I think some part of the content that we will discuss out here would be aligned with the book, right? And first I would like to crowdsource what challenges are you facing with respect to the next 93 days. I'll list out some of the challenges which I feel would be there. Scheduling is, I think, one of the most important challenge at this point of time. What else? If I can get some crowdsourced responses. What do you have a challenge with respect to the next 90 days? Scheduling is one major thing. What else? Sectional test versus full length test. Okay. What? GS versus optional. Okay. What else? How many test papers to write? Reading new content. Content or revise existing, right? Handwriting. Okay. I think it's a good question on me, right? Handwriting. I think it's a good one. Handwritten notes versus coaching or toppers, right? How much to write? Okay. Anything else? Current affairs. I think how much writing I have written somewhere. How much to write? Essay now or later? Okay. Anything else? More or less good to start, right? So I think I'll start with scheduling. See, what I understand with respect to scheduling is that there are multiple factors which will influence how you schedule your preparation. The max optional person will have a different schedule compared to, let's say, sociology. Amount of time that you invest on the optional is something that's going to be subjective to potential scoreability and with respect to your past experience. If you have not done well in the past mains, it's quite possible that you would want to invest more time on a respective paper. This is bound to happen. Scheduling will also depend upon which attempt is this. How many first timers? A lot of first timers. I think almost 30 to 40% of people who have cleared this time are first timers. And I don't know whether it's a good thing or bad thing, to be honest. Because the first mains I always feel is that it's very tricky because, and it's your best mains also, to be honest, because it's the best mains because you know very little. Right, I say this that you know very little is a good thing because the more you know, the more you're confused on what to write. How many people are there who have written more than one mains? There are one or two people out here, right? The more you know, what is happening is that we see increasing incidents where people misinterpret the question because there's always a bias to write what you know rather than what has been asked. This is happening. The more number of years into preparation, the content that you write, at least some part of it becomes redundant or repetitive in nature, and that doesn't add value. And first timers are best prepared to write mains because you'll think otherwise. You'll think that, you know, this person has written 4 mains, he's better at this. This person has appeared for interview, he's better at it. I don't think that's the case. If you're able to manage your time, and if you're able to manage your stress around how you're preparing, I think first time can be the best attempt, right? We have cases, even though not a lot, right? I do have the statistics on how many people have cleared mains from the first attempt and second attempt vis-a-vis third and fourth attempt. Statistically, the number of people who clear from the first and second attempt is lesser compared to third and fourth. But every year there are exceptional cases where people who are able to figure out what exactly has to be written is able to write. So someone who's preparing for the first mains will have a different schedule. Someone who's writing a consecutive main will have a different schedule. Someone who has written mains in 2022 or 2021 did not clear prelims the next year, happens. right? And then they are appearing for prelims in the third year, mains in the third year. They'll have a different schedule. People who have gotten ranks this year, who are looking for a rank improvement, would have a different schedule and plan. People who are in service, but unfortunately could not clear the last 2 prelims, and they're coming back to this examination after a gap of 2 years. I've seen a lot of people this year who are in service, did not clear earlier attempts, but they have an opportunity to write this year. I think this has also got to do with the idea that there are 14,600 plus candidates who are writing mains this year, and this gives a lot of avenue for a lot of type of people to write this. So I just want to so I feel the factors that will influence is whether you have appeared for a mains before or not. What type of optionals do you have? Are you a working candidate? How much time are you able to dedicate for this? You may find it surprising, but there are still people who are working parallelly with appearing for mains, and they may not have all the time to prepare for this examination. And we also have candidates who have short optionals, candidates who have long optionals, candidates who have scoring optionals, candidates who have less scoring optional. The strategy of a person who has commerce and accountancy, which doesn't go beyond 260 most years. Anybody with commerce and accountancy? Nobody out here, right? I'm just giving an example, right? Will be completely different from someone who has anthropology or let's say political science, where there is a relatively higher potential to get more marks. Then there are subjects which does not have a lot of guidance, no test series available, no material available, like veterinary science. How many of you have heard of this? There's a subject in mains which is veterinary science. And I think the entire number of students who write veterinary science mains will be not more than a WhatsApp group of 20, 30 people in India. Right? It's a very small crowd. So they don't have a lot of peer group, they don't have material, various things are limiting them. So as far as scheduling is concerned, what I feel is that we have different approaches out here. Right. I feel first mains, the question is not just about how much time you dedicate for a particular subject, how you start out, right? See, writing has become an integral part. The expectation of the evaluator from a standard question has significantly increased. What was considered as a good answer in 2018-19 is an average or below average answer today. So more people are writing. Foundation programs have inculcated answer writing into their schedule. Every week there's a test. So people have started writing, and if you have not written enough or if you have not fine-tuned how you're writing, I think this is a space where you should do that. And in June, with respect to subject and with respect to tests, we are expecting that in the next 15, 16 days, you will write at least 1 to 2 tests or 2 to 3 tests this year, right, in June. I had someone come in the morning and she was like, I have not prepared to write this. Even at your peak performance, even when you have studied everything, you are not prepared to write this because you have multiple questions. See, I always take this example of main score, right? The highest score almost every year is 45 to 47% of the total. In any other examination, that will be a scandal. Imagine if you got 47% in your plus 2 or 10th or in graduation. But in UPSC mains, getting 47% is a big thing. So the conclusion is that I don't think anybody has full competence over every subject area and every syllabus keyword in this examination. Or the fact that UPSC will ask questions from areas that you did not think will be asked, or will ask questions which are extending into areas which was not very expected. Or they will ask questions consecutively in the same year. I had an experience in 2021. The faculty gave us a question on quad. And I said, last year, IIA, right? They're not going to ask this year. I did not put it. But they asked a question consecutive year on the same theme. So they're constantly trying to, test and unsettle the way people are writing examination. And this can also be seen in the case of themes that we select. Sometimes we are a year or two ahead when we select a theme. Now, this year I'm sure everybody is going to generate a question on generative AI in paper 3. And take it from me, they're not going to ask it this year, most likely, right? They'll wait for a year and they'll ask it next year. During the COVID year, we had asked questions on vaccination, types of vaccination and how is one different from the other. They did not ask for that for 2 years. And then they came up with a question on vaccination. So the nature of question keeps varying, right? So all I'm saying is that we should be starting with 2 to 3 tests for someone who's first mains, someone who's writing a consecutive mains also 2 to 3. But the approach that I'm expecting for someone who's writing mains with respect to the subject and consecutive mains is slightly different. First timers, I'll always prefer to start with GS1 and GS4. I have my logic. My logic is that GS1 has a lot of continuity from prelims. You have already studied a little bit of history, art and culture. If you have qualified prelims, you have done a little bit more. You have some command over these subjects. Geography, you have done some amount of geography, right? Society is something, at least some questions you can respond to. So start with GS1. That would be the best way to start. GS4 is another option. Either you can go for a combination of GS1 and 4 or GS1 or 4, right? GS4, why? Because it will not take more than 15-20 days for you to do GS4. The syllabus is not very vast. It's slightly, and half of the paper is case studies, for which practice is more important than studying a certain material, right? So you can more likely conclude GS1 and 4 in the month of June, and balancing, I think, optional and GS is something that people have asked. Now, one of the things that you will do from July onwards is that every week, one day is a test day, right? That's probably a Saturday for someone, Sunday for someone else, Wednesday for someone else. Because what we have realized is that on the day you write test, you don't have energy for anything else. So why not write 2 or 3 tests on the day you are writing the test and take the next day, half day off. Don't burn out. You will have your time of 12 hours, 14 hours in the month of August and September. But don't start with very high expectation from yourselves. If you go for a very, rigorous schedule in the month of June, you may not be able to sustain this in August and September. Start slow, escalate in July, peak in August, and then we'll cool down in September. This is the idea that I would stretch, right? So there are again 2 ways of looking at balancing optional and GS. Either you can go for exclusive approach where you're just doing optional on particular days, right? Monday and Tuesday is for optional. Half of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is for optional, and Thursday, Friday, Saturday is for GS. For some people, they find it very difficult to study 2 subjects together, or they find it difficult to transition from one subject to another subject. If you don't want to go for an exclusive approach, you can always go for a mixed approach where every day is divided into 2 parts. Conventional wisdom is to dedicate half a day for optional and half a day for GS, even though optional will account only for 35% of your written mark, vis-a-vis GS, which can cross above 50. If you look at the marks of people who have this is all the ranks. If you look at the top, I think we have 44 people in the top 100 ranks. And what we have realized is that the percentage of score that comes from GS is above 50, and the percentage of score that will come from optional is below 35 for most cases. Exceptional cases are there. So I assume that the amount of time that you should invest on optional should not be compromised by investing a lot of time in GS, a lot of time in optional, right? The idea is that sometimes it does not transform into marks, and you will feel after mains marks come out that, I should have studied GS a little bit more, and that effort would have gotten me at least 20-30 marks more. So find a balance where this is happening, and if you are having optionals which require more time, most likely these optionals are the ones which has an overlap with your respective GS subject also, like PSIR. How many PSIR out here? That's a very small, okay, 3, okay. Usually I think out of 44 rank holders I have in the top 100, I think 11 are PSIR. So I'm assuming 20 to 23% in the top 100 ranks are PSIR, which is followed by anthropology, right? This is the usual stake. So certain subjects are good to study along with GS because that will provide you an overlapping syllabus. Now, someone who's good at PSIR will have a reasonable command over GS, paper 2, as well as some part of paper 3 and some part of paper 1. And we see a good correlation between optionals and certain subjects. Now, we have seen a lot of instances where people who score well in history not necessarily history, but geography are usually doing well in paper 1. The correlation is pretty good. So that is because people leverage their optional knowledge into GS. We have seen other cases also. This happens when somebody from a geography optional try to spend a lot of time on geography answers and they compromise history and society. And geography answers, they end up writing extremely complicated answers which are not necessarily to the level of the evaluator who's checking this. From what we have understood about the evaluation process, we assume that optionals are being checked by subject experts and GS is being checked by generalists who are not necessarily from that subject background. And if they are checking it, you have to write to the level of the evaluator. And we have also seen that people who have law optional or people who have PSIR optional do well in paper 2. I think almost every year people who have PSIR optional are doing well in paper 2. Usually the top scores are from PSIR optional students, right? So whatever, I'm sure you have your optional that will help you leverage the subjects that you are respectively preparing for those particular papers. But you should also understand certain nuances with respect to the paper. You should write to the level as 1. You should also be familiar with the sequence of questions which will arrive in a particular paper. In GS2, it's very likely that question number 9, 10 and 19, 20 are IR questions. But if you are not following that and if you are not emphasizing your right time to the right questions, it's quite possible that you will write the last 2 questions as 19, 20 where originally you had good content but you don't have time now. Imagine landing up at question number 19 and realizing that, oh, this is a question I know, but now I have only 10 minutes to write 2 15 markers. You will land up in this situation because it has happened to others. So it's very likely to happen to you as well, right? So in a test series, what you do is that you must understand the nuances. Where are the themes coming from? Where are the questions coming from? If you look at the book which is in your hand, go to page number 40, 39, 40, right? Yeah, this page. Just, I think it's page number 33 onwards. Page number 33 onwards, what we have done is, we have highlighted from where, how much marks weightage are questions coming each year. Why is it important to know where questions are coming from? It's important to know because you have to emphasize there. Page number 33, before that, right? Yeah, those tables, right? So it is important to emphasize time on where questions are coming from. I'm sure you are aware that paper 1 is a composition of 3 major subjects: history, geography and society. History cumulatively across all its components has a weightage of 75, which is 3 10 markers and 3 15 markers. Same applies for society, which has a weightage of 75 marks, and then you have geography, which is 100 marks. But the problem with history, unless you are a history optional student, is that there is no predictability from which part of history will questions come from. There are years when there are 50 marks from art and culture, and then there are years when there is nothing from art and culture. So I don't think that's a topic where I would invest a lot of time. If you have certain advantages with respect to your optional subjects, you will be able to invest time on that. But if it's not your forte, I think to do well in GS1, you will have to invest your time in society and geography, right? And if you look at geography itself, 100 marks will come from basically 3 major headers: physical geography, environmental geography, and economic or human geography. These are the 3 major components from which marks come. If I divide the 8 questions which will come from geography, 4 will come from physical geography, 2 will come from environmental geography, and 2 will come from economic or human geography. And here also there are some highly recurring themes. If you go further into page number 37 onwards, the recurring themes, you will see that there are a lot of questions which are repeating and coming from the same set of areas. If you get a question on landslides, and if you get a question on monsoons, or if you get a question on, let's say, climate change and vulnerability, you should be ready to write those answers because it has happened before. Unless UPSC decides to do a CSAT on us, right? Then it's a different game, right? I'm just putting that caveat out here right now. But I also have a theory on this. If UPSC has to make main stuff, they'll not complicate, they'll simplify. Because as of now, if you look at the last 5 years, the questions are complicated. It's very current oriented. It's analytical in nature. Now, if UPSC has to put you in a spot, they have to ask questions like, what are the different constitutional provisions for emergency? How is this emergency different from the other emergency? You're not ready for that. Last year, this happened in paper 1 when questions came, what are the different types of rocks? Nobody was ready for that, right? Otherwise, the kind of questions were more conventional and you could anticipate it. And if this happens, first timers are to gain. Because you're straight out of foundation classes, you have more conceptual clarity, and the second and third and fourth mains people have moved on, and they are very at a higher pedestal where they are going for analytical questions, right? So take it in writing. If this is going to change on its head, it will happen because it will ask very basic, simple. Last year they had asked cell composition. They can ask very simple question. What are the various components of, let's say, AI system, or what is quantum computing? How is quantum computing? What are the components of it? They'll ask into the essential aspects of it. We'll try to include some of these questions in third set. You're going to cry. You're going to complain, I know. But we have always tried new things so that you're ready and you're tested. Last year or last to last year, we had a student who called and complained to us, you're asking questions from 2 years ago. And that year in mains, there was a question which was 10 years ago. Right? When we ask, you complain because you have an avenue to complain, and you can come and say that, this is not good, let's not do this, right? But our role is to test you in different scenarios so that you are ready for all possible circumstances in this examination. So 2 to 3 papers to start with. Why less number of papers? Because you will have to consolidate your content. You will have to, most people are running around for what should I refer to. I don't have notes. I don't have handwritten notes. You'll have all kinds of reasons for not having enough time to write. So we start with GS1 and GS4 and spend half a time for optional. And for others, I think for people who are consecutive mains and multiple mains, the difference is that for people who have gone for consecutive mains, they have appeared in 2022 and then they are writing 2023. That's a good scenario because you have a mains experience which is less than a year old, right? People who are writing multiple mains are the ones who wrote their last mains in 2021 or 2020 and 2019, but they have a break in between. And usually when you have a break, you are not, I always say that, having more time is a bigger challenge than having less time. Because when you have less time, you're more focused and you are more targeted with respect to your preparation. But when you have more time, you have so much distraction, you have so many thoughts, you are emotionally charged when you have more time. You have more time to think, right? So this is the multiple mains people. And these are the people who are writing mains after a break. I know students who have written their last mains in 2018 and then now they are writing in 2023. That's a gap of 5 years. They did not appear for the examination or they could not clear prelims in earlier years and now they have cleared the prelims. This is almost like a fresh attempt because when you are out of this race for 5 years, you're a dinosaur. You don't know what happened in the past. Like you have become archaic, so you will have to start from fresh. Then I have rank improvement crowd and service candidates. I'm sure we don't have people out here, but I'm also speaking to people on the YouTube. There are some people maybe who are watching, right? So there is a rank improvement crowd and there's a service improvement crowd. Rank improvement crowd is most likely people who have secured a rank this year or last year and who are looking for an improvement in their rank, but they have not joined their service. They have been under EOL. I think we already have more than 50 rank holders who are part of the program who have enrolled in our test series who are looking for rank improvement. That's a competition. Unfortunately, this year, not many rank improvers have secured ranks. Conventional wisdom is if he's rank 200, there's a very high probability that he'll become rank 50 next year. This has been past experiences. But if you look at this year, I think a substantial number of people who have secured ranks were not able to improve ranks or are not even in the rank list, right? So there's a rank improvement crowd and then there's a service improvement crowd. The service improvement crowd is the one who has joined service in 2019-20. They've gotten a service which is other than something that they had preferred to get. And they completed their EOL, they joined their job and then they gave prelims and they cleared and then they are appearing for this. So everybody would have a different strategy as far as preparation is concerned, right? So July, I think 2 GS per week and 2 essays per month. My ideal timeline for essay is 1 essay every fortnight, right? Somebody asked me whether you should wait for GS to syllabus to complete to start writing essays. I think a lot of these essays are very philosophical in nature and abstract in nature. It may not have a direct impact between the GS knowledge and the essay. The best time to repair the roof is when the sun is shining. I think your inherent knowledge is sufficient to write something like this, especially when the word count is 1250. You're not writing a 2500 big essay. I think even good 8 to 9 arguments are sufficient to write that essay at any point of time. And I'm sure if you're forced to write that essay right now, you'll be able to write something, and this will not be substantially different from what you'll write in September. Because essay is something that we have internalized, and it'll come out. It's your basic values that's coming out, right? So I think essay, I have kept a constant. Again, this is an opinion. See, I am keeping the session to the point. I'm not going to give a lot of GAN and not patronize you or sell the course. The purpose is not to sell the course, right? So we have kept essays every month, 2 essays. And I think for all the segments, we have kept 2 essays per month. So I'm ideally expecting before you, appear for the mains examination, you should have written at least 6 essays, if not more. And we have an excellent essay program with Ruchika ma'am handling it, right? And if you are waiting for the program to start and want to write something, I think the best option is to write a PYQ essay topic. Especially the last 3 years, don't go beyond last 3 years. It was a different type of questions. When I wrote my last mains, it was question was very simple, like point system in education. It was a completely different year, right? We had very simple, direct, extended GS questions as essays. Now you don't step into the same river twice. You are not the same person, or the river is not the same river kind of essays. So these are different. Also different because if you write that essay today, and if you decide to write that essay 2 weeks from now or 1 month from now, you'll write completely different content. You're not going to write the same thing because you're going to internalize certain things and you're going to interpret those things differently, right? Now, GS2, 2 GS papers per week in the month of July, because I'm expecting you to warm up. You have to decide how you're going to write between June and July. What is the approach? What is the sequence of attempt? What is the way you're going to format your answers? What is the way you're going to introduce your answers? Because once we close this in June, July, August is to apply that approach as many times as possible and internalize that approach. People who are writing mains after a particular point of time, or people who are writing a consecutive mains, or people who are writing a mains to improve ranks, one of the things that we expect is that you should have a different approach so that you can expect a different outcome, right? You should have some kind of variation from your earlier attempt. And we are noticing that every time somebody brings in a novelty, they are being rewarded. If I look at, let's say, I think my first mains was 2016. This is my 9th mains as a person who's running the test series, right? So the first time I think we saw a paradigm change in the way people were writing answers were when Anudeep Dureshetty started drawing schematics and diagrams. And he had very less content compared to people who were writing in earlier years. I think this was in 17 or 18, right? And then the next 3 years, everybody started drawing diagrams and people started coming saying that, I've drawn 10 diagrams in my answers and I still got less marks. So people started equating that, there is a direct correlation between diagrams and the way people score marks in exams. But I think that plateaued in 2020, and then we had Vishakha Yadav start the example approach. I think she was the highest scorer in GS in 2020 or 2019, which was escalated by Divya Mishra. She was also one of the highest scores in GS. Then Shruti Sharma took it to the peak, and now Rank 1 has taken it to its highest point, to the extent that we have people who think examples are more important than arguments. We have instances where we are looking at a paper and we have just a heading, woman empowerment, and then 3 data points. There's no correlation between that argument and what has been asked in the question. Now, I have a theory on this, that earlier when a few people were doing this, let's say Shruti Sharma was doing it, or let's say, and triangles are out of, everybody's examples are in triangles. See, when something becomes obvious and common, it's very difficult for the evaluator to differentiate your answer vis-a-vis the next person. Why it could have worked for Shruti Sharma, because her paper was one of the few papers which had triangles highlighting her examples. So now if everybody does it, now I think if you have seen this year's Rank 1's copy, the conclusions have Amrit Kal and India at 75. And I'm pretty sure that this year almost every conclusion is going to be on those lines. And then it becomes obvious, right? So even in terms of introductions, we have seen that people who write constitutional article was considered as a very good thing in 2018-19. Now it's a very basic thing that everybody does. So what I'm trying to say is that you have to bring in some kind of novelty so that it fetches you more marks. Novelty can be in the way you are interpreting your question, right? If I have to take an example, last year in the test series we had asked a question, how far do you think government policies shape and fuel multiculturalism, right? This is the question. And I think I should use more board, right? And what would be the conventional response? People would describe multiculturalism, or there would be a data that India has this many languages, this many people from this many tribes, and this will be a data-based introduction, and then there will be a heading, this is how government policies shape and fuel multiculturalism. And people will write about constitutional laws, schemes, policies of the government, and how it's shaping and multiculturalism. If there are 10 people writing this answer, I have 6 people do this. There were 1 or 2 people who broke shaping and fueling into 2 separate parts. They said policies are shaping multiculturalism because of XYZ reasons. Policies are escalating multiculturalism or fueling multiculturalism because of the following reasons. This is the second set. And I assume the difference between the first set and the second set would be half a mark more or 1 mark more because they have brought in 1 more dimension into their answer. We had a third set, which was maybe 1 out of 10 or 2 out of 10. When they concluded, before they concluded their answer, they brought in a small paragraph, which was basically saying that government policies are not only shaping, but they are also stifling multiculturalism, right? Promoting a uniform language, right? And how many people would have done that? Only 1 or 2 people. And I think that innovation with respect to the way you interpret a question plays a very important role when you are trying to get an additional mark. Believe me, evaluation is an extremely monotonous and boring job because you're reading the same content again and again and again. You're going to write mains in the next 3 months. At your peak performance, the top 5,000 candidates would have read the same material, attended almost the same classes, written the same tests, consumed the same value addition material. Do you think there will be a huge difference between one answer and the next answer? It will be more or less similar. There will be a lot of themes and points repeating. And as an evaluator, if I am checking 100 copies of the same particular code, I am seeing this again and again and again and again. And that's why I think diversity in examples in ethics is very important because everybody's answer has Buddha, Gandhi, and Ambedkar, not undermining their contributions, but everybody's answers have the same set of value addition, so there is no differentiator. If you're able to innovate and bring novelty into your answers, either in the way you are writing these questions, either in the way you are interpreting these questions, either in the nature of value addition that you have, this has a potential to add a half mark or 1 mark more to your answer. And this is basically the game, the difference between someone who does not qualify mains and someone who gets a call for the interview or someone who gets a rank will not be more than half mark or 1 mark per answer. A good candidate who's appearing for mains this year would have a score ranging from 350 to 450. And this is just a variation of half mark to 1 mark, 0.75 marks in every question. And as an evaluator, I have evaluated copies. The last time I've evaluated is a long time back, but when we evaluate, you two are writing the same content, right? I may give him half a mark more because his handwriting is more neater. And it's not a bias. It's very intuitive and natural for me to do it. Because our eyes are more designed towards things which are aesthetic in nature, which are easy to consume. Handwriting is important. Somebody talked about handwriting out here, right? I personally feel having a good handwriting is important because it's easy to consume your answer in a given point of time. We don't know how fast UPSC checks a paper, but I am assuming they don't have to write comments like us. They don't have to write macro comments, micro comments. You're not getting the paper, right? So there is no, what do you call, mechanism where there is a accountability that is happening. I'm assuming they would be checking a certain number of copies which will be substantially more than the number of copies that one of our evaluators will check. And when they're doing that, it is going to take them not more than 45 seconds or 1 minute on a given answer. Have you thought of it? Many of you are writing your first mains after 3-4 years of preparation and you've gotten that one shot at this, right? And they're gonna read that one answer in 45 seconds. Right? That's your 4 years of effort or 3 years of effort that's being judged in 45 seconds, right? And when they do it, it's your responsibility that he's able to read it faster, he's able to see your examples better, you're able to impress him. One trend that we have seen emerge this year is that introductions and conclusions have gone from unidimensional approach to multidimensional approach. When I say unidimensional, multidimensional, earlier it was sufficient to put a data point in the introduction. Now there's a data point and a quote. Right? So people are trying to one up, right? Because everybody is going to write a constitutional article. What if I write a constitutional article and a quote from the Prime Minister? And then the evaluator is impressed that, you know, this guy has written something more than the next person and he'll give you half a mark more. Right? So it's changing. I think one of the point I put with respect to answer writing is that there is continuity. IBC model is working, intro, body, conclusion. Almost everybody goes for IBC model. People are giving data points in introductions and conclusions. But there is also change in the way people are writing their examples, the nature of examples, the diversity with respect to the examples. And we are also seeing that people have, you know, balanced between explaining and value addition. Now, I told you because of the peak of example mode of writing, we have reached a stage where people are writing more examples and less arguments. It was working earlier because 6 out of 10 people were explaining and 4 people were not explaining and examples were being written. The evaluator, who's not necessarily from the background that you are, they are not from a coaching industry, he's not your colleague or your roommate who knows what you're writing, was able to understand what you were trying to say, reading others' copies where explanations were there. Imagine a scenario if that threshold is moving from 4 to 6 to 7 to 3. 7 people are giving example and 3 people are explaining. It's quite possible that the evaluators are not able to understand what you're trying to say. Possible, because it's just a data point. You have not contextualized it to the demand of the question. We don't know whether GS papers are checked by subject experts, or we don't know whether GS papers are being checked by one person, one copy. Now, a lot of people ask why paper 3 is scoring less. I think if you look at the last 4 years' score, paper 3 scores have not gone beyond 105. 108 was the highest, if I am not wrong, in the last 4 years in paper 3. So people ask, I did a lot of things for paper 3. I was getting good marks in test series in paper 3, but I got very low marks in UPSC. Now, why I feel you get less marks in paper 3, there could be a couple of reasons. One, I feel, is that if the papers are being checked by multiple people, paper 3 will be checked by 4 or 5 people. Possible, right? If 4 or 5 people are checking 4 or 5 questions at a time, they would have developed a certain competence on those 4 questions. If you're just checking 4 questions after 4 question after 4 question, your expectation from those 4 questions would be higher. And then you will say that, you know, this is not good enough, right? You know, this doesn't have this, right? Second reason I feel why people score less in paper 3 is that not everybody has competence on all topics in paper 3. I've always seen somebody who's weak in economy, or somebody who's weak in science and tech, or somebody who's weak in security. Nobody has competence over all components of paper 3, right? Third, I don't think the bouncers are most likely to happen in paper 3. First question in economy, pick up the last 4 years. It's a core economy concept, potential GDP. What is? It's a very conceptual question and it's very difficult to answer. Almost every year, one question in science and tech is difficult to answer. S400, right? Security also, overground workers, difficult questions. So I think in every year in paper 3, 3 or 4 questions are difficult for people to almost everybody to answer, right? 4, I also feel that the demand for data is the highest in paper 3, value addition, because almost everything is factual in nature. Divya Mishra was a student 2 years back. She had one of the highest marks in paper 3. And I remember counting more than 150 data points in one of her paper 3, in one paper. And it doesn't take a lot to reach 150 data points. You just have to write 6 to 8 data points in every answer. So the demand for data, the demand for competence in all areas is very high in paper 3. And that's why paper 3 is scoring. I assume that this is why paper 3 is relatively scoring lesser. If you go back to 2018, 17 and all, paper 3 used to do crazy well. There was a year when rank 1 had only 98 marks in paper 4. That year everybody had 140, 150 marks in paper 3. So I think that has been inversed right now. Now, if you look at the last 4 years, paper 4 is where people are scoring good marks and paper 3 is where people are scoring less marks, right? Again, coming back to the schedule. Right. Coming back to the schedule, I think July is when 2 GS papers per week plus 2 essays per month, and I will go for GS2 and GS3 plus optional. Why July for GS2 and GS3? Because the content which is more dynamic in nature comes out mostly for GS2 and GS3 in the month of July. August is a time when I'll increase my writing, because here I would have finalized how I will write, how I will approach questions, how I will interpret the questions. Our role is a maximum in June and July, where we help you decide how to write, right? And then here emphasis would be on GS2 and GS3. And in August, I think you have seen the book. We have given 30 pages of topics which are most likely to repeat. Now, within topics also which are more likely to repeat, there are two types of topics, where there are themes and dimensions which are more likely repeating. And then there are topics where themes are repeating, but dimension or application of that themes are not repeating. Now, if you look at urbanization or population or globalization or any of these topics, every year they tether that keyword to something else. Population and old age, urbanization and women. So there are two types of repeating themes. One set of themes are where it keeps repeating from the same areas, and one set is where the area is tethered to a different area. Now, the problem with repeating themes is that the expectation is the highest in those themes. In almost paper 1, paper 2, paper 3, I can to a certain extent say that 8 to 10 questions are going to repeat from themes unless UPSC decides to do something else, right? Again, a caveat out here, right? If they're going to repeat those 8 to 10 themes, India, China, elections, panchayat, federalism, Gandhi in freedom struggle, 1857, population, poverty, women, role of women in society, extremely recurring themes, right? If they're going to repeat those themes, more people are competent to write good answers in those themes. So the expectation of evaluators in these repeated themes would be higher, because almost everybody would write a decent answer, and this is where you have to enrich and add value into your answers, right? So here you will pick up, let's say, I can almost bet that there will be a question on population this year also, because if you look at last 9 years, I think there is a question every year on population and related issues. This year again, because India has overtaken China in population, so again it's in news, so you will probably get a question which is related to a different dimension. And UPSC has a tendency to ask a positive question on something that we perceive negative. I don't know whether you have noticed this, like, role of Rajya Sabha is extremely positive. Like, like that was a year when it was so much in news that, you were not thinking about a positive question. We all asked a negative question that, how this can be improved, and our questions was towards the negative interpretation or application of that particular topic. So now we are seeing population as a good thing or a bad thing, and they'll ask an opposite thing. So always anticipate that they will ask something that is from a theme that is repeating, and when those themes are repeated and asked, you should write a better answer than your peer. These are the themes where your introductions should be better, your conclusions should be better, you should have diagrams and maps ready. A Himalayan ecosystem-based climate change question is very recurring, you'll see, right? Landslides or something on those lines is extremely repeating. If you don't have a good diagram on landslides, and if you don't have a map of North India marking where are the landslides happening, that's on you. This was expected to come, and if you did not prepare for it, that's on you. If you get a question on cybersecurity and you don't have the data points to substantiate your answer, that's on you, because it was expected, it is expected. Left-wing extremism is expected. It will come again and again. GST in the last 5 years, I think 4 times it came. Last year we all were expecting a question because it was 5 years of GST, and we were expecting that, it's going to come. They did not ask, so this year it will come, right? So you should have those data ready, and you should have different from what everybody is trying to write. I had a student last year whose rank is 6 or 7, 𝐎𝐲𝐞𝐧 𝐒𝐬𝐬𝐢𝐵, I don't know how many of you remember him, right? Rank 6, right? I think the only paper he wrote was with us. One paper he has written, and that was with me, right? And we had a chat after he got a rank, and he said that, in his answers on security, he had gone to the NCRB report and picked out how many people have been rehabilitated from left-wing extremism, how many were arrested. How many people would have written that? If you don't take that effort, if you don't go into the source documents, if you're consuming what everybody, there's a quote of Murakami which goes like this, if you're reading what everybody is reading, you'll think like what everybody is thinking. You have to go beyond the conventional sources, because conventional sources you have already consumed, and you have a conceptual understanding. The conceptual understanding is sufficient now. Now you need the content to enrich which will be different from the next person sitting to you or the next paper that is checking you. Your paper should not be the paper that gives a higher marks to the next paper. we have noticed this, that when a really bad paper comes in, the next paper gets better mark. Right? I always feel bad for someone whose paper would have been checked after Shruti Sharma. Right? The evaluator went through this and, oh man, this is awesome. And then the next paper is like, this is not good enough. And I'm sure that would have had a drag of 10 mark on the next paper. So evaluation is extremely biased. Extremely biased to the extent that, evaluators are happy when you write something that they know. They think that, you are as smart as they are, right? Evaluators are happy when they learn something new from you, right? That is why all your answers should have a composition of something that everybody would know and something beyond that. And that something beyond that has to be researched, prepared, read, reread, and rewritten. Now, I'm sure at least half of the crowd out here will write 40 papers between GS, optional, and essay in the next 90 days, right? Don't look at me when I say 40 papers. It's not a big number, right? It's probably 25 papers of GS, 10 papers of essay, 10 papers of optional, and 4 or 5 essays. You're going to reach there. And 40 papers is roughly 2 lakh words, right? You don't understand the gravity of what you're going to go through in the next 90 days. You're going to fall apart. You're going to be anxious. You're going to be stressed. You're going to want to stop this. I've had top 10 rank holders reach out to me 1 week before the examination saying that I'm not appearing for mains, I'm not ready for this. Nobody's ready for this examination. Somebody was telling me a top 10 rank holder this year after the interview broke apart because she felt that her interview was very short and she was expecting very low marks. And she's in top 10, right? I'm not naming, right? But the expectation would be different. Now, what I'm saying is that you will have to practice and you will have to write, and when you write, you are going to experience the scenario that you will get questions from themes that you have already written. Imagine we are going to ask a question on delimitation. We are expecting it, we are asking it, right? We will ask. So this is a hint on a question, and I'm sure everybody is going to ask a question on delimitation, right? But can you ensure that the answer that you wrote in the test series or in the mains is a better version than what you wrote in the test? Because the conventional practice when you write a test is you get the test evaluated copy. First thing you check is that is there enough comments? Is my money that I have paid been put into the paper, right? If there's not enough comments, you will raise a ticket or call the institute and say that my paper is not checked properly, and you will get the paper rechecked or whatever. But very few people build on top of what has already been written. The ideal practice for people who, when they write a test, is that you have to pick up a copy, evaluated copy. Most papers are checked with red pens. You buy a green pen and go and write. I should write a better introduction than this. This was stupid, right? I should have a better dimension in this answer. The conclusion, I could have added this. And then if that question repeats, you're going to write that answer faster and you're going to write a better answer. If you don't do that, you're going to do a ritualistic approach where you write 40 tests. You're going to sit in front of me or somebody else next year after mains and say that, sir, I wrote 40 tests, still I did not score. It's not just about writing, because writing will create a certain amount of fatigue. And unless you are building on top of what you have written and enhancing what you have written and rewriting what you have written, you will not be able to make the best use of answer writing. Now, we have had toppers. Last week we had 2 toppers in the top 15. Rank 7 and rank 13, right? One person said that, and I think I would suggest this, in your schedule, I would ask you to integrate 1 hour of PYQ every day, at least for the first 40-45 days. Why? Because you need to understand what you learn, what will be asked from it. What you learn, how you can apply in answers. And a lot of themes are repeating, and it will also help you understand which is the best test series, right? Because sometimes test series have a tendency to ask questions and the primary intention is to cover all themes. So they'll have 4 parts in a 10 marker and UPSC asks just 2 parts. So integrate PYQs into your optional as well as your GS paper, where at least 1 hour a day should go into PYQs, right? So you know that these themes are repeating, you know that I'll be able to write a better answer than this next year, and if you're doing PYQs for 1 hour a day, you will be definitely able to cover at least 4 to 5 years of GS1 and 4. Why GS1 and 4 last 5 years? Because these are static papers and there is not much change that happens with respect to these papers. When you're writing last 5 years of case studies, you have 30, 40 case studies to write. You can write a case study a day. Mix up the topics, write all these answers, because unless you write, you will not be able to integrate. Now this top 10 rank holder said that he integrated 1 hour of PYQ for his optional, which was anthropology, and not so surprisingly, he has got 328 marks in anthropology. That's, for people who track marks, that's a crazy mark. That's one of the highest marks in optional this year. He has also improved, as far as I know, 50, 60 marks in GS. So he has done 1 hour of PYQ practice for optional as well as GS. And outside of this, he has written 40 full papers. I'm sure that the number of answers that he has written is somewhere around 1,000 to 1,500 answers. I had rank 13. Kritika, I think rank 13 or 14. I always get 14, right? So she said she finished 1 Trimax pen every day in the last 50 days. I've had people do this before also. So now this strategy is called 1 pen a day, right? Like 1 apple a day, 1 pen a day, right? I think why it works is that it's not about where you write, because you are writing, you are rewriting, you are writing again and again from the same themes. Believe me, if you write 5 answers on secularism, there is nothing that UPSC can throw at you on secularism which cannot be enriched or written with those 5 answers on secularism. I have this strategy where, you know, let's say you're weak in geography. What is the weightage of geography? 8 questions, 100 marks, 4 10 markers, 4 15 markers. If you're weak in geography, I think the best way to build geography in a short term is to write 8 into 10 or 8 into 15 geography answers. That's 80 to 120 geography answers. And I'm sure you will write at least 10 location-based questions. You will write at least 10 questions on, let's say, Himalayan ecosystems, or you'll write 10 questions on various aspects. And when you write and when you rewrite and when you enhance, you're going to build, I think I should take my tummy in when you're taking photo from there, right? So when you're building on top of themes, so whenever you feel that a particular theme you're not good at, let's say you assume that you're not good at science and tech, multiply it into 15. And where do you get these questions from? You get these questions from PYQs, you get these questions from whichever test series you're joining, and other test series that others are writing. See, one of the biggest challenges when you're writing this mains is that you have something called as the FOMO factor, the fear of missing out, right? You're going to think that, you know, if I don't write that and I don't write that, I will miss the questions that they're writing and they'll get 1 mark more than me. Yes, they'll get 1 mark more than you. I think there was a year we got this rocket architecture question, we hit straight. Like it was directly, the theme was a spot on hit. Everybody who wrote our test series had a direct hit on that particular question because they were able to write a better answer, they were able to get 1 or 2 marks more. So even if, see, one approach is you look at all the prominent test series, you join, see, you need 3 test series, right? One you need for scale, which a lot of people are writing because you want to understand relative performance. Write a 4 test with something like that, right? One you need for input, where someone will sit and tell you that, you know, someone will hit your head and say that, you know, this is not what you do, this is what you have to do, right? That's the test series for input. And third, I always believe that, you know, you should always do something extra for ethics in GS because that's the paper where you're most likely to score and compensate the lack of score in paper 3. If you look at the marks of people who have gotten marks in GS, you'll see that there is a trend that their marks in paper 4 is 120 plus and their marks in GS 3 is 90 to 100. So the only way you can do more in paper 3 is, paper 4 is by writing more in paper 4. So you have to choose where you're writing and what you're writing. But you must ensure that you are familiar with all the questions or all the prominent questions that the test series are asking. And you must ensure that you must glance at the last year's and last to last year's questions. I'm not saying to solve, but we will hit questions from last year and last to last year because UPSC, even this year's prelims, questions have come from what was prominently in news or what was expected in last year or last to last year. They're going to do this. If you can't look at all the test series questions of all the institutes for all the topics, look at all the topics which are more likely to throw bouncers at you, right? Art and culture, world history, post-independence, social justice, security, core economy, science and tech. So you must ensure that at least on those areas you are familiar. See, we're going to repeat at least 40% of the question, all of us. At least 40% of the questions will be on similar themes. So if you are solving, let's say 50 papers, ideally you should be solving 1000 questions, but there will only be 500 to 600 unique themes there. So identify your roommate or your friend who wrote prelims with you but did not clear, put him to work, right? Ask him to collect put him or her to work, ask them to collect all the papers and ask them to filter out the gist of what are the unique themes that is coming towards you. Write on those answers, build on those answers. And when you write mains this year, I want to hear from you that, sir, at least half the paper came from what I was expecting to come. And this is something that we have commonly heard from people who have scored good ranks. Top 50 ranks, top 100 ranks, they anticipate themes, they predict 100 years of Jallianwala Bagh. There's a probability that there's a question going to come, right? Or this is the year of millets. We asked a question on millets 2 years back. And I think that question is going to come this year, right? So you should see, in the end, this is a competitive examination. We don't know how the outcome will turn out. You have to make this process interesting. And 6 months from now, or 1 year from now, or 2 years from now, you'll remember two things. There was a certain rush in these 3 months, right? Which is fun, like, especially, I don't know how many of you have been organizers in youth festivals and all. You remember the day before youth festival, like, it's going to be 3 months of the day before youth festival, and, it's going to be that rush. And second, when you think back of these 3 months, you should say to yourself that, this was the time when I worked hardest in my life. This was the time when I sat up till 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock. Many people will ask, how many hours should I study, right? Start out slow, but there should be months in these 3 months where if you're awake, you should be studying. If you're conscious, you should be studying, right? You should be writing. This is what I've heard from toppers. I'm not making these up. These are things which I've heard from people where they say that, they wrote 50 papers, they wrote 3 test series, or they did a lot of things. Test series is basically just an avenue for you to pick up questions and write, right? You don't have to join everything. Sometimes you can join some and you can use some to practice a question, right? And don't take the marking in test series too seriously, because everybody has their marking pattern. We have a very objective process with respect to marking, and I believe that's going to be much more objective than maybe even UPSC is doing. Because we have a quantified approach towards marks for introduction. Every argument has a certain weightage, every conclusion has a certain weightage. And that is why when we reevaluate a paper, let's say you write a paper and you are not happy with it, and you ask us to reevaluate it. And when we reevaluate it, the variation between the first score and the next score will not be more than plus or minus 5. Plus or minus 5 could happen because it's very subjective. You liked the person, you liked the handwriting, you were in a good mood, you were in a bad mood. XYZ factors can affect. This year, come to think of it, we have people who have 450 marks in GS who has 80 marks in essay. How is that possible? Like, somebody who scores 450 plus in GS should ideally get at least 100 marks or 110 marks. So it's highly unpredictable with respect to how scores will turn out. Test series is a place where you experiment your approaches. It's like those cliche lines, no? You have to bleed in practice so that you don't get wounded in war. It's been used so much that, it's become a cliche, right? So test series is a place where you experiment. What should I start with? In one test, you start from question number 1. In another test, you start from question number 11. I don't advise starting from question number 11, because you will write great answers from 11 to 20, and you will write bad answers in 1 to 10, and I'll start from question number 1 to evaluate. And by the time I come to your 11th question, which is your best answers, I've already formed an opinion that this is an average student. And this is why a lot of people are scoring less in ethics also, because they start with case studies. They take 1.5 hours, more than 1.5 hours in case studies. They take 1 hour 45 minutes. Then they're left with 1 hour 15 minutes for 13 10 markers, which is going to be a ride. They're not going to write great answers on those questions. They're going to just fill up gibberish in at least 4 or 5 questions. So test series is a place where you play with sequence. We can help you out. I think one common challenge that people have is, I can't complete the paper. I don't write more than 16 questions, 17 questions. I'm not saying that I'll magically pull you up from 15 to 20, but I'm assuming I can pull you up from 15 to 17 or 15 to 18. We can discuss certain strategies which can pull you up for 1 or 2 questions. And you'll definitely write faster in mains because you don't have toilet breaks, your hands don't pain. You know this is a real thing. If you don't give your 100%, you will not score enough. So we have always noticed that people who get good marks in mains, or people when they write mains, are at least 10 minutes faster than their test series. So if you're writing up to 3 hours 15 minutes, it's fine. See, the first paper that you're going to start, many of you are going to take 3.5 hours, 3 hours 45 minutes. That's fine as long as you're improving 5 minutes in every test. But if you make that a norm and you write every test in 3 hours 30 minutes and 3 hours and 45 minutes, you're in trouble, because you are not going to write more than 15 questions. So test series is a place where you incrementally improve and experiment what you are doing. Incremental improvement will come with respect to the way you are approaching a question, interpreting a question, the way you are writing introductions. And every test is an opportunity to try something new, right? Initial test, don't worry about the time, because we are learning how to write good answers. Later test, we are trying to learn how to write maximum number of good answers within the given time, right? I think it's a sign that I should use more board, right? So this is a this is visible. So scheduling is something where you have to take into consideration the amount of time that you're going to invest to study, the amount of tests that you're going to study, right? The number of subjects that you're going to parallelly handle, and different people will have different challenges. And for custom strategies, I'm just going to speak a general approach which will be common for a lot of people. But if you want to discuss a specific approach with respect to you're going to write, you will have to come and meet us. We'll probably sit with you and put an Excel sheet and say that, you know, we can do this, this and this. Right? So for people who are writing consecutive mains, I think emphasis should be on most probable areas, or revising or enhancing areas where you have not done badly. So you have a lot of people who have gotten less marks in a particular paper. I constantly get this feedback that, you know, I got less marks in paper 1 and I'm bad at geography. Obviously you're getting less marks in paper 1 because you're bad at geography, right? I got less marks in paper 3 because I did not do science and tech and disaster management. So for people who are going for consecutive mains or repeat mains, I think the primary emphasis should be to identify those syllabus areas where you are weak and building on top of it. People who get good ranks or people who improve ranks are people who don't have syllabus blind spots. They're good at world history also, they're good at science and tech also, they're good at, maybe they have spent enough time to do that, right? First attempt you are not competent enough, or you have not spent enough time on this. There's this quote that, you know, I'm not smarter than you, I just spend more time on the problem. Right? You just have to, maybe the people who are reappearing are people who have spent more time on the problem, right? I'll share this document. I think I'll put an email ID towards the end of the session. Whoever wants any of these documents, we will share this, right? Other things which we are noticing with respect to way people are writing, value addition, multidimensional, balancing between expanded answers versus expanded value addition. I think you have to find a balance. If you're not substantiating your argument, you might as well write a coherent sentence. If you're substantiating, I can understand you don't have the time or space to write a coherent sentence, so you can have a shorter sentence out there, right? Other things which we are noticing is that, what do you call, people are using a lot of quotes. This started with Abhinav Jain last year. It's increasing. It has still not reached its peak. So I think quotes are still working. Make sure you go through all the government websites and look for quotes from the Prime Minister, Home Minister, Environment Minister, Foreign Minister. I've seen toppers answers which starts with a Foreign Minister's quote and concludes with a Foreign Minister's quote. Right? Basically, maybe it works for people because the evaluator is able to make sense of what you're able to say and is able to relate with what is being said. Right? Predictable themes, I think you should look at it. This is also interesting if you have not seen this yet. We call it a toppers comparison sheet, where emphasis is on quantifying what exactly you have to improve. Now, another major challenge that people who are preparing in the last 2-3 years is that the number of avenues where guidance is being provided, especially free guidance is being provided, is extremely large. When we prepared, we did not have toppers Telegram channels, we did not have YouTube channels, we did not have multiplicities of ideas being thrown at us. We had clarity, and I think having a clarity what to do without being, bombarded by way too many ideas is a better approach. Clarity in the sources and not having too many sources. I'm sure you would have heard this 100 times by now. Limited sources, maximum revision. And this is something that keeps recurring because this exam has this tendency to have a lot of peer pressure on you. You're sitting in a library and you see a nice book with your person who's sitting next to you, you're forced to buy it because you feel that that's something that I'm missing out, and what if a question comes from there? Possible there's a question that's going to come from there, but if you read way too many materials, you will not be able to decide what to do. Every topper is uploading their answer. Every institute is uploading their toppers copies. When you're looking at toppers copies, there are two things that you should look for. How close was it to the examination? Because if you notice many of the websites, they are uploading copies which is 1 year old, 2 year old. They just want to prove that at some point of time this student was associated with us, right? So that may not be reflective of what worked for them in that given year. Second, did that topper score well in that paper? None of the institutes are uploading evaluated copies. Everybody puts unchecked copies. There's a reason, I think. One reason is that people are going to ask that why did you give only this much marks? Why did you give? Why she's gotten only 50 marks in your paper and she's got 120 in UPSC? So it's going to be very difficult for institutes to justify that or respond to that. So when you're looking, you make sure that the person has scored well in that particular paper. I've already collated a document. We have a sense of, it's not everybody, it's 150 people in the rank list this year, which is almost 15% of the total list, which is a sufficient data size to conclude what are the highest scores in the respective subjects. And I'll show you certain interesting things. The average score of 140 rank holders in essay is 114.7, right? If you go into the top 100, that average score becomes one second, I don't have internet. I had a friend whose internet connection was Jon Snow is dead. People have weird, internet connection names also. In the top 100, we have 44 people in the top 100, and the average there is 121. Essay has not done that well, as you guess. It's mostly hovering around 110 to 120. We have people who have gone from 140 to 80, 140 to 95. There are people in the rank list who are not in the top 100 or top 10 because they have gotten less marks in essay. If you look at the GS total of the top 100, if you're aspiring for a top 100 rank, the average is 432. This is not everybody. I'll again put that caveat. It's 44% of the top 100 ranks. You have to get 432 marks to get into the top 100. Optional is even more disturbing. 284 is the average score of optional in the top 100 ranks. It's always important to have a target because at least you have something to aim at. Whether you reach there or not, nobody knows, but at least you know that this is what I need to get. I need to get 120 in the essay, I need to get 425 in GS, I need to get 280 in optional, and then I have to hope that I get 180 in the interview. Right? If you look at the average of the interview score also, this is also, I think, $183. I had a student who improved a rank from 201 to 47, 46 or something. I don't know whether you've heard of this girl, Sanjana Simha. She's from Karnataka, if I'm not wrong. When she got rank 201, she had come and we had sat down and, we eventually realized that you have to make an improvement of 46 marks or 45 marks, and she made 2 marks more improvement on top of that. So I always suggest to people that you need to quantify what are you targeting. Even if it's your first attempt, even if it's your rank improvement, write down this is what I want to target. Put that number on the board. Put the number of tests that you're planning to write on the board, because you're constantly reminded that this is what you have to do, right? Look for, I'll share this, I think maybe some of you already have, these files are in some of the Telegram groups also, right? Look at the average score of GS1, GS2 and GS3. If you notice, the average score of GS3 is substantially lower. 89. And that would be considered as a bad score in paper 4 or some other subject. Paper 4, the average score is 118 if you want to be in the top 100. If you wanted to be in the rank list, you should be scoring at least 110. So you know that there is a higher scope to get in paper 4, and what is the composition of that to your total also. Because I wanted to statistically show that in the top 100, majority of people have 55% of their score coming from GS. Optionals are contributing close to 30-35%. And this will also depend upon your respective optionals, right? Make sure that you are looking at the respective themes. So this particular document is where we are expecting that you will quantify what exactly are you doing, what are the toppers doing, and what is the change that I need to implement. Because unless you quantify, writing is a muscle memory. The moment you start writing and after you cross the first 5 questions, you'll do exactly what you have been doing before. So you should have a laminate in front of you clearly telling man, write more points. Make sure that you are substantiating this many arguments. Make sure your conclusions are better. Quantify what are the best practices that has to be adopted. And this has to be done by mid of July. At least by end of July, we have to close how we are going to write. And in August, we will apply as many full papers as possible. And in September, I'll request you to write at least 2 simulators. If you have not written mains, you are not ready for what you're going to go through in those 2 days. When you are writing 4 papers of 5,000 words each. Ideally, it's 4,150 and 250, but nobody writes 4,000 words. Everybody writes close to 5,000 words. And when you're writing 20,000 words in 2 days, you're not ready for that unless you practice this. And we constantly see this among people who get ranks and people who improve ranks, that they write 2 or 3 simulators back to back, 1, 2, 3, 4, then they take a day or 2. Don't go beyond 7th of September in writing answers, because I don't want you to stress too much and have a cramp on your hand or something where you can't write anymore, right? Writing is important, but equally important is to enhance and build on top of what you have written. If that theme repeats, if that PYQ repeats, if that syllabus component repeats, you should be writing a better answer. Keep telling yourself, if this question repeats, will I write a better answer, right? So if you are spending 3 hours writing a paper, I don't mind if you are spending another 3 hours working on top of that paper. See, there are a lot of post-test exercises where you look at what is the better way of interpreting this question. Better way of interpreting is important because you want your interpretation to be novel and different from the next person. You have to bring out some dimension which is not there. PYQ is the best place to implement this thought process. You have to inculcate this thought process into your head, because at this point of time, you're not thinking like that. But from today, when you're reading that question, the first thing that you should ask is, what will everyone else write? How can I add one more dimension or something new to this answer? And that should reflect in your answers. If it is not reflected in your answers, look at comparative good copies and see what are others doing for the respective questions. Good copies of the respective tests are very good sources for enhancing your preparation, because these are the same answers to people who have answers to the same questions that has been written by someone else. That's why I sometimes suggest that people who are writing the mains next year, write test series with people who are writing mains this year. Then you will have answer sheets to compare your answers to the people who got ranks, right? And this is the part where we have concentrated on all the predictable repetitive themes. At least solve these 30 papers. If you are not able to do all the PYQs, which I'm saying, at least solve these papers, because these themes are repetitive in nature. You should have better introductions, you should have better conclusions. For students who are in the online platform who don't have this book, you can always come and collect this from the office. We have not released a PDF book because last time we did an answer writing book, some institution I'm not naming, right, literally copied everything and put their, logo on top of it. So we won't be releasing the PDF of this book. If somebody wants this, you can come and collect this book from the institute. Now, thinking process. Now, look at this question. How does patriarchy impact the position of middle-class working women in India? Simple question. You can write it right now if you want. Right? Majority of people will define patriarchy, or they'll talk about female labor force participation rate, and they'll talk about how it's low in India, and they'll start out. And the next most possible scenario is patriarchy has a negative impact on working women. And they will list out 10 reasons or 10 explanations for this. But imagine if you're able to say that, impact of patriarchy on working women is different in different parts of the country. How patriarchy impacts working women in South or Northeast or in West or in Central India would be different. How patriarchy is impacting in a spatial temporal manner would be different. Can we think of drawing a table where on one side you're saying how patriarchy impacts choice of jobs, how patriarchy impacts promotions, how patriarchy impacts post-marriage job selection? You have to think of how my answer is going to be different and innovative than the next person. That evaluator who's going to look at that paper should think, this is different. Let me give one more mark into this question. Right? So take these questions. Do we have cultural pockets of small nations all over India? Elaborate with example. Imagine just before the conclusion, you are saying that there are cultural pockets of small India across India also. It's not just a global scenario. You have Bangalore, you have Hyderabad, Gurgaon, where there is a composition of this. And I'm suggesting a new set of conclusion. How many of you have read this book, Factfulness? There's a nice book, Factfulness. Basically, the book is trying to say that irrespective of how much you complain, this is the best time to be alive. If you look at, let's say, education, if you look at electrification, if you look at communication, think about what it was 100 years ago. UPSC is going to ask you questions. So despite implementing all these schemes, poverty is still high in India. You're going to cry and write, we did this, we did that, it's still high. But imagine when you're concluding, you're saying that at the time of independence, poverty was this much, but we have improved this much. That's a positive mindset. That's not going to happen on that day of the examination in the examination hall. That will happen if you think about it in advance and prepare it in advance. Differentiate how your answers are going to be, right? So you have to write what everybody else is writing, and you have to add something little bit more. Maybe that will occupy 1/3 of the space of a page or 25% of the space, so that just before putting marks, this person feels, oh, this is new, right? This is different. I cannot spoon feed what to do, right? I think the best compliment I've gotten in the last 10 years is that I increased the cutoff by 50 marks. That's the best compliment, because we have spoon-fed everyone to do this and this and this and this. Innovation is something that we cannot spoon-feed. We can validate this. We can tell you what more can be done, but you will have to try at your end, and this will be influenced by various things that you are being exposed to, right? What are the continued challenges for women in India against time and space? What if before conclusion you're going to write about some emerging challenges which will come? ChatGPT is going to take a lot of service jobs, and this change in technology is constantly changing the way jobs are being affected. How many people would write? That's not your intuitive way to think, and that's not something that's going to come naturally to your answers. You have to be ready for this. You have to prepare so that you're going to write one more thing that the next person does not think of. That will be different for different people, because you're going to think of something else, right? And that's where your half a mark is lying. That's what is going to push you from 360 to 400, or 390 to 430, or 400 to 440. That's not just in terms of the content interpretation. Maybe it's in the nature of explanations or examples that you're giving. What if you're able to, like I was taking the example of 𝐎𝐩𝐞𝐧 𝐒𝐬𝐬𝐢𝐵, right? What if you're able to give examples which are not written by everybody else? What if you've gone to a core document and picked up something? Next 90 days is differentiating what you're doing. Everybody is going to buy compilation of facts by a certain institute. Everybody is going to buy current affairs compilation of, everybody is consuming the same content. Do you think you can write a different or a better answer if you're consuming the same content? You have to consume what everybody is consuming, and you have to think beyond that, and especially for recurring themes, you have to write better answers because the expectation would be higher, right? And in this book, we have also included the PYQ of last year. I think within 1 week to 10 days, we'll be releasing the last 5 years PYQ. Because when you are solving PYQ, one of the things that you need is to compare your answers with something else and build on top of it. See, if you don't have notes, I'll suggest a strategy. Pull out the test series keys of n number of institutes, and you have 30, 40 keys. When we make a key for a particular question, we try to summarize that into one side, or we try to summarize that into, what do you call, 2 sides maximum. So it's the most concise form of content that is relevant with respect to that particular topic, right? And when you have such kind of a concise content, why do you have to create your own? Delegate whatever you can delegate. There are 2 things which only you can do: revision and writing. Current affairs, you can delegate it to the Mac program or some other program that you think it is appropriate, because you're paying that money for that 50 hours that you can spend on writing or revising. I always tell people that, you know, that's going to be half of what you spend in Rajendra Nagar if you have to stay for 1 more month. Think like that, think constructively, think about what can be delegated, what can be done by somebody else. Find a roommate, find a junior, give them work, tell them these are the themes which I don't have value addition, just research and bring it for me. So that you have unique things which are not being done by others. So with respect to current affairs, with respect to ethics, with respect to optionals where you are looking for enhancement, convert that into classes which can be consumed either in online or offline format and build that into your answers, right? Don't spread yourself too thinly. You will not be able to revise. You will not be able to. We have seen this, that, you know, a lot of toppers, a lot of students who appear for mains have amazing notes, but there is no correlation between the notes and the answer sheet. There's a correlation between notes and answer sheet if you do sufficient number of revisions. And that number is 10, 20, 50. See, now we have started an AIM program. I don't know whether you're aware of this. In this, what we are trying to do is we are making people make notes on every topic, both concise notes as well as value addition notes as well as concise notes. We want for these students that when they are appearing for mains or prelims next year, they have something that they can read before they get into the classroom. Yesterday, I had a student who come and said that my optional notes is 1400 pages. How many times can you read that? 2, 3 at max. How much of that will you recollect and you will be able to put into your paper? Concise, crisp notes is a very integral part of getting good ranks. If you don't have your notes, scavenge all the Telegram groups and see something that you like. I had promoted this notes of Hrishikesh Reddy 2 years back. It became very popular. I'm sure you'll find it in all the. I think we were partly responsible for that becoming viral, right? But now it's 3 years old. If you don't have your own notes, adopt somebody's notes, print it on one side of the paper, spiral it so that on the back side you can keep updating. Look for jugaad techniques. You can't do all these things from scratch right now. Adopt somebody's notes, add on top of it, revise, and write. After you write, see if you are able to bring what is in your notes into your answers. If not, you should make sure that you are able to bring it next time around, right? I don't know whether I've missed anything. Anything else I have not talked about? I have this space till 5:45, right? First time means we have talked about anything that you want me to clarify on. See, my concern with this is that you will be practicing for a marathon and you will be going for a sprint. What is the mode of examination that you're writing? Your examination is going to be 20 questions in 3 hours. Daily answer writing initiatives are most likely 1 question a day, 2 questions a day. And if they are creating fresh questions, they are more likely to create questions from an individual editorial. Those questions are not. We started making our paper for MTS in January. For every question, I think we selected 5 questions from 500 questions. We do a lot of research. The fact that we are able to give reasonably good papers and we are able to hit themes is not a random thing. We put efforts. Daily initiatives don't have the bandwidth or the timeline to do that. So they are more likely to pick up an editorial and ask a very broad question from that, right? And you are not writing in the format in which you should be writing in the examination. When you write 1 question at a time, 2 questions at a time, you have a very good dopamine effect. You feel good, the handwriting looks good, everything is nice, hunky-dory. And then you go to mains and then you write 20 questions. So at least write 1 hour at a time. And if you have to write 1 hour at a time, start with PYQ. So nothing better than that. Because you will be dealing with what are the themes that's coming. I don't mind you doing daily questions, but do 1 hour and do PYQs, right? What else? Something else? What to do about ethics? I think study is one word, right? Scores tend to fluctuate a lot. But I think I'm seeing a certain consistency with respect to people who score well in ethics. See, for me, ethics is a composition of certain number of keywords which are values: integrity, emotional intelligence, aptitude, attitude, XYZ. What do you need to write a good answer on ethics? You need a good definition. You need diverse examples. You need theoretical interlinkages to those keywords. You need diagrams which can be used in the context of those keywords. You need quotes that can be used in the context of those keywords. What if you're able to shortlist that these are the 22 keywords in ethics, and for every keyword you have a 2-page note which is basically a composition of definitions, quotes, examples, and within example also go for diversification of examples. If you're going for a governance-based questions which is asking about CSR, you should have examples from startups, right? Your examples has to be diversified and innovative. When you're looking, don't limit yourself to the Buddha, Ambedkar, Gandhi approach. And I had a topper last year, rank 51 or 52 or something, 𝐎𝐻𝐞𝐧 𝐒𝐬𝐬𝐢𝐨𝐧. Right? I don't know whether you've heard of this guy, right? He said what he did was that he put a map of the world and he started collecting examples from every part of the world. So he said my answer had Frida Kahlo from Latin America, and I'm sure nobody's answers had those examples. And when an evaluator goes from one paper where there is 𝐎𝐩𝐞𝐬𝐬𝐢𝐨𝐬 and then there is Frida Kahlo, he's like, oh, this is interesting, this is nice. So you have to differentiate. He also said something very interesting. He said that, I don't even eat a bad food during those 3 months, which makes my mood bad. Keep your emotions and keep your, emotional health also well. Ethics, so what I'm assuming is that, we have an excellent program by 𝐀𝐬𝐿 sir. I think there's an open session on 24th or 25th of this month, where sir will be explaining about, it's a 25 hours classes, 8 days of 3 hours. It starts on July 2nd and the classes will finish on July 15th. 8 days, 3 hours each. I think he has also dedicated time for case studies as well. And sir is the most senior and the most experienced and the most vibrant faculty as far as ethics is concerned. If you have not met him, you should meet him. He is amazing. So delegate your ethics to someone else where you are going to spend 25 hours into a class, and that will enrich your answers, right? Find every keyword, enhance, write. And for case studies, I think the trick is experimenting with respect to the way people approach. Now, we assume that the stand that we have taken in that case study is the best possible stand, but the evaluator may have a different expectation. The evaluator could feel that this person is too idealistic, this person is too practical. They have not even got into service, they have started thinking about jugaad ways to get things done. Possible, right? People could have a different opinion on how you are doing. Hence, I don't feel the case studies are as scoring as part A for me, because part A is a very quantifiable set of 13 questions where there's a question and there's a direct demand and then there's an answer. And I have seen disproportionately that people who start with part A score better than people who start with case studies. Case studies will be about innovation, practice. Do come and meet me with your case studies. We can always try some new ways of writing. Over the years, we have invented a lot of new things. Stakeholders, we have invented stakeholder and ethical issue. We have invented approaches with respect to choices. We have invented approaches with respect to decision matrices. There are a lot of new things that you can try in case studies. I think somewhere in my laptop there should be a collection of 100 different types of case study introductions. We have done this. It's not our first year doing this. We have done this for a lot of time. So we have done this a lot of time, right? So case studies, work on case studies. And there are some really nice videos. When you come and meet me in person, I'll explain. There are some things which I can't put in the screen out here, right? Videos, work on the keywords, work on enhancing them. Think of innovative diagrams. How many of you have read 𝐷𝐴𝐻𝐿 Patnaik's �Gita? There's a book, 𝐷𝐴𝐻𝐿 Patnaik's �Gita. Right. Check out the book. I think it has some of the best diagrams that you can copy for ethics. You will have to look at the odd places where you will get inspirations to adopt, right? So ethics is where, I think ethics is also where we can probably integrate one quote and one ethics case study every day. It will break your monotony also, right? Because when you're preparing continuously for optional and you're moving to GS, in between add a case study there. And try solving the same case study with a different mindset. Today I am 𝐎𝐩𝐞𝐬𝐬𝐢𝐵, how will I deal with the situation? I am Arvind Kejriwal, what will I deal with the situation, right? Think how different people will think for the same situation. See, another challenge that has happened right now is that one more skill has been added to the preparation aspirants' skill sets, reading speed. Take CSAT, take ethics case studies. Most of the case studies are 1 page long. Just to read those 6 case studies, it's going to cost you 15 minutes. So you have to practice when you're reading the case studies, you have to highlight the keywords, you have to take out the stakeholders and write. You should not have a situation where you have to go back to the case study and read it again. You have to make it easy, right? Case study is something I think that we can figure out, right? Ethics in general. Anybody else, anything else? I really hope it doesn't fall apart. It's been way too much. I think the habit of newspapers are important. Editorials cannot be delegated. You will have to read editorials because that gives you an essential understanding of it. But that doesn't mean that you have to read editorials on the same issues 30 times. How many editorials on the Ukraine crisis would have come in the last 6 months? Countless, right? I think such kind of things you have to go for compilations to get the essential values. Current affairs are better, I think, from compilations and handouts and things. Somebody else is sitting and typing and making that for you for free. Why do you want to do it? You can invest that time reading it, revising it, writing it, but delegate whatever you can delegate. Inculcate the habit of reading newspapers at least till end of July. August you skip it, but read newspapers so that it's part of your routine, because this is a very important aspect during interview, during prelims. You can't take that out of your system. But that should not be something where you are sitting and making your own notes for 3 hours. Don't do that. Right? Anything else? Can I wind up? Anything else? I'll be available at least till 9 o'clock. If any of you want to come and meet me. Online students also, if anyone wants to come and meet us, come to the center, right? And we'll discuss how to go about in the next 90 days, right? It's going to be difficult, but we'll figure this out.